lightning talks. Kind of the idea behind it is to get people practice getting in front of the podium, kind of testing out their skills. So we have a couple speakers that'll go out tonight. They're going to be about 10 to 15 minutes. Since we have a little extra time, you can play around. You can be more or less. I'll give you a 5-minute warning before the 15s, and then I'll start like throwing stuff at you.
Music.
Yeah, oh, we're gonna do music. I need one of those big hooks and just like pull people off. The only announcements I know at the moment, mostly for the Converge B-sides for 2016. If you're interested in volunteering, let me know. I think I gathered some names last time.
Yeah, I forgot to use my number last time.
Except for him. Alright. So with that, we can actually just start. Do you want to go first? No pressure?
Sure, why not?
Alright.
Single him out.
You look prepared with the
You
paper.
mentioned the capture the flag, or
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, do it.
Is anyone sign up to do the capture the flag on November 21st? No.
Behind you.
Yeah, the RUCTF. You are. Yeah, everyone else should too.
I think I'm supposed to. That one's the one that goes like starts at 4 a.m.
Yeah, so I said like we have to be there like 5 a.m.
Can you cancel my class that day?
Need to be on site at 5 a.m. Yeah, we're staying in Detroit that day.
It's canceled.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yes.
But, I mean, it's still open. We need red team members and dev team members. So everyone's down.
So it'd be safe to say if anyone's interested to come contact you.
Yes, absolutely.
Alright. Find him after the talks. With that, President over. Do you have a USB stick or what do you need? Got all your things? Holy cow, you have like a little case?
Yeah. I do what I can.
USB stick before you insert it into your laptop. You've been fuddling with electronics lately.
No.
It's fine. And if you want to draw, you can touch this thing.
Mm-hmm.
That can just be crazy.
I can figure out how your USB ports work.
You gotta flip it. Yeah. So probably next time I should probably ask for PowerPoint slides ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's still connected.
Still shows up. We're good.
All right. Game on.
Let's go.
Woo.
Wait, hold on. Let's do this.
All right. Let me know.
And go.
Hi everyone. My name is Ryan Adair, and I will be presenting basic cryptography and security. So, what is cryptography? Cryptography is the method used of storing and transmitting data in a particular form so that only those whom it is intended to read can read it and manipulate it. The scrambling of plain text, which is just clear text that is set to be encrypted or decrypted, into ciphertext, which is the actual encrypted data, through a process called encryption, then back again through a process known as decryption. Plain text data gets run through a cryptographic algorithm, which is a set of procedures based on mathematical formula used to encrypt and decrypt the data. There's also something known as a collision or a clash, and that is a situation that occurs when two distinct pieces of data has the same hash or message digest. There are 5 basic protections that every cryptographic algorithm offers. That is confidentiality, integrity, availability, authentication, and non-repudiation. Confidentiality is basically keeping information private by only allowing the approved parties to view it. Integrity ensures that the information is correct and that any unauthorized person or malicious software can't manipulate or alter the information. Availability makes sure that only the users who have the key can access the information, so it can be stored on a central server or a public server and they can get to it when they need to. Authentication allows the sender to be identified by including a digital signature that is included with encrypted information. And non-repudiation provides proof of a user performing an action, such as they can't deny having sent that message. There are different types of ciphers that each algorithm uses. The first is a stream cipher, and there are two different kinds of stream ciphers. First, there's monoalphabetic substitution, which substitutes a single letter for a single letter. Then there's homoalphabetic substitution, which substitutes a single letter for multiple letters or characters. Block ciphers take entire blocks of data at once and encrypt them all at once. And then for added security, you can mix and match those blocks. And a newer function called the sponge function takes a string of characters of any length and produces any variable length that you want. So you could take a string of 512 characters and have it produce 1024 characters. Three broad categories are hash algorithms, symmetric cryptographic algorithms, and asymmetric cryptographic algorithms. Hash algorithms are just one-way encryptions. They're the most basic kind, and they're basically used for a digital fingerprint, or making sure nothing's been altered in the data. Three main things that define a hash are it has to be a fixed size, or the digest has to produce the same length every time. It has to be unique. Two different sets of data cannot produce the same digest, which, as I said earlier, is known as a collision. It has to be original, which means you can't produce a predetermined hash from the data. And it has to be secure, which means it cannot be reversed. And that's the thing about the hash, is you don't reverse a hash. That's why it's used to check to make sure things haven't been altered. Different types of hash algorithms are an HMAC, the MD, the SHA, Whirlpool, and RIPE-MD. HMAC, or the Hashed Message Authentication Code, is just a message authentication code that combines a shared secret key that is only known to the sender and receiver, along with the message. When the receiver gets the message, it is known that it came from the sender because only they know the secret key. This serves to authenticate the sender. However, a MAC does not encrypt the message itself. An HMAC is a hash-based authentication code in which a function is applied to both the message and the key. HMAC is widely used in internet security protocols to verify the integrity of transmitted data during secure communications. And different protocols that use these are IPsec, transport layer security, which is set to replace secure socket layer, and secure electronic transaction. And those are just a few that use it. Message digest is one of the most common hash algorithms. And there are three different kinds that have been released. There's MD2, MD4, and MD5. And what MD2 does is takes the plain text of any length and creates a digest that is 128 bits long. It then divides the plain text into multiple 128-bit segments. And if one of the segments is less than 128 bits, it adds extra padding to it. MD2 is no longer considered secure, so it's not used. MD4 is basically the same thing, except it takes blocks of 512 bits and uses those. The thing about MD4 is, shortly after it was released, it was considered insecure and withdrawn. MD5 is the current version of MD and it was created after MD4, and it addressed the weaknesses of MD4. MD5 pads its plain text messages into 512-bit length segments, and then uses 4 variables, each 32 bits in length, in a round-robin style to create a compressed value to generate this digest. And what a round-robin is it takes each block and matches it with each set of data at least once, and then rehashes it. SHA, or Secure Hash Algorithm, is more secure than MD. SHA is a family of hash algorithms, the first being SHA-0, which was withdrawn shortly after its release due to a flaw. Its successor, SHA-1, was developed by the NSA and NIST and was patterned after MD4 and MD5. SHA-1 creates a digest that is 168 bits long instead of 128 bits. SHA pads its messages that are less than 512 bits with zeros in an integer describing the original length of the plain text. It is then run through the SHA algorithm to produce the digest. SHA-2 is comprised of 6 separate hashes: SHA-224, 256, 384, 512, 512/224, and 512/256. The last number being the length, or the hash length. SHA-2 is considered secure currently. SHA-3, known as Ketchek, is the latest version of SHA and was designed to be dissimilar to previous hash algorithms. This is done to prevent attackers from building upon any previous attacks, making it more difficult to crack. SHA-3 uses a sponge function instead of a block cipher or a stream cipher to encrypt the data. Because SHA-2 is still considered suitable for general use, the NIST considers SHA-3 a fallback encryption method when SHA-2 becomes broken. Because, like everything in cryptography, it will eventually break. Whirlpool is relatively new, and it takes messages of any length less than 2 to the 256th power bits and creates a digest of 512 bits. RIPE-MD, or Research and Development in Advanced Communications Technologies, or RACE, Integrity Primitives Evaluation Message Digest, was designed after MD4. The main draw to RIPE-MD is that it uses 2 different chains of computation which are then combined at the end of the process. There are different types of RIPE-MD based on how long the digest is, each offering different benefits. RIPE-MD 128 and RIPE-MD 160 are considered faster than RIPE-MD 256 and RIPE-MD 350, while RIPE-MD 256 and RIPE-MD 320 offer a lower chance of collisions. None offer an improvement in security over the others. Then there are symmetric cryptographic algorithms, which is also known as private key encryption. And what it does is it uses a single key to encrypt and decrypt the data, hence secret key, because if anyone else knew it, it would not work. Different types are DES, triple DES, AES, RC, Blowfish, and OTP. Data Encryption Standard, which is DES, was developed by IBM and originally known as Lucifer. DES is a block cipher that divides plain text into 64-bit blocks and then executes the encryption algorithm 16 times. DES uses a 56-bit key. When it was known as Lucifer, it used a 128-bit key. And first gives an initial permutation. Then each iteration substitutes and permutates before going to the next iteration. After 16 iterations, or rounds, the initial permutation is reversed and applied to the 16-bit iteration, then produces the ciphertext. DES is no longer considered safe for use and has been broken several times. I'll skim over the rest. Triple DES is basically the same thing, except it does it 3 times instead of just once. The Advanced Encryption Standard, which is today's standard that is used by the government and most agencies, which is also known as Rigendale, performs 3 steps on every 128-bit block of data. During each 2-step block, it is run through multiple rounds depending on the size of the encryption key. The reverse cipher, or RC, is a family of ciphers ranging from 1 to 6 through RC1 and RC3 were never publicly released. RC2 is a block cipher that uses 64 bits. RC4 is a stream cipher that accepts keys up to 124 bits. RC5 is a block cipher that accepts blocks and keys of different lengths. RC6 has 3 different key sizes, 128, 192, and 256 bits, and performs 20 rounds of encryptions on each block. Blowfish is a block cipher that uses 64-bit blocks and have a key from anywhere from 32 to 448 bits. And OTP is a pen and paper cipher where you take the numerical value of the letter and then you take a key of the same exact length and take the numerical value of that letter, add them together, add 1, and that produces your ciphertext. And that is one round of the advanced encryption standard. Then asymmetric cryptographic algorithms, which is public key encryption. Each user has 2 keys that encrypts the data, one public and one private. These are RSA, ECC, and True Encrypt, and quantum cryptography. The big draw of this is it can be encrypted both ways. So the way it works is if you want to send someone a message, you take their public key and encrypt it and then send it to them, and then it can only be decrypted with their private key. And then if you want to sign something, you sign it with your private key, and then it can be decrypted with your public key, and that way it is verified that you sent it. RSA takes 2 large prime numbers and computes the keys mathematically. The ECC, or elliptic curve cryptography method, generates 2 keys through properties of the elliptic curve equation instead of traditional methods. And True Encrypt is relatively new. It uses neither prime numbers nor an elliptic curve, but instead uses lattice-based cryptography that relies on a set of points in space. Quantum cryptography, which is still theoretical, takes the spin of a photon, or a light particle, and measures the spin of it when electronically charged. It is then sent to the recipient. They match it, and if it matches, then the message decrypts. And the big draw, or the key to asymmetric cryptography, is the key exchange. And the Diffie-Hellman M ephemeral, the elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, and perfect forward secrecy are different methods to these. The way Diffie-Hellman works is it requires each user to agree on a large prime number and a related integer. Diffie-Hellman ephemeral does the same thing, except each key is discarded after each use. Elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman uses an elliptic curve instead of prime numbers in its computations. And perfect forward secrecy is a public key system that generates random public keys that are different for each session. The value of perfect forward secrecy is that if the secret key is compromised, it cannot reveal the contents of more than one message. Any questions, comments, concerns, quandaries, or quagmires?
I want to know more about quantum.
So do I.
So, quick question though.
What's that?
So, a couple weeks or a month ago, there was an NSA advisory about the elliptical curve,
Mm-hmm.
ECDHE, and their recommendation was telling people to hold off from deploying that because they felt that with quantum computing down the road, they will be able to crack all that. To crack those packets.
Math-wise, yes.
Mhm.
Quantum cryptography is quantum computing is a big problem because it can crack mathematical equations like it's nothing.
Okay.
But also, with the introduction of quantum cryptography, that won't be a problem because it's not based on mathematics. It's based on the spin of a photon.
Mhm.
And that's something that even quantum cryptography needs to catch up to. So with the introduction of quantum cryptography, something like quantum computing would take years, if not decades, to catch up.
But we don't have quantum cryptography yet.
Well, quantum computing's not that advanced yet either.
Oh, I got quantum computing in my house.
You should see his basement.
Want to invite me over sometime? No, it's. It wants
Awesome
to.
job, man.
Thank you.
I need everybody another round of applause for Ryan. Did a great job. Next up, we're gonna have this guy, Mr. Dan, something Dan. Do you have your own laptop? You've got it. Of course, you have your own laptop.
He has a laptop.
That's fine. No, it takes 10 seconds. I unplug. You plug in.
Yeah, famous last word.
Whoa! Whoa!
I've used this thing. Fails me every time.
Oh yeah, I have to.
Whistler didn't even bring his laptop out.
Yeah. And
Probably wouldn't allow it if we
no,
made the
people
choice.
allow it. I'm gonna try and focus. I will focus. Because once the laptop lid opens up, I'm gone. Might as well just have Delta 2 on the front of my phone. It's good.
Which way are you going?
I'm just checking how far the camera goes.
Yeah, the cameras really only shows this piece, so
As long as I don't walk past here, I'll be
yeah,
fine.
as long as you don't do stuff like this. Very good.
I won't be doing that. That's get there.
Actually hurt my calf. Is that bad? I'm getting old.
You might be.
And and our next speaker, Don, what can do now?
Hello.
Hi.
Excuse me. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am here to talk to you about ways to make sure that you are heard, to make sure that your message gets across. It is vital that we're able to communicate our ideas.
Do you really want to do this stuff? Did you really prepare? It's kind of. Does anyone want to listen to this?
I have a question.
What?
I have a question. So I have Verizon, and can you hear me now? Good.
It's.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
Oh,
time
how
for.
about this? How about, do you want to try it again?
Can I
maybe?
start over?
Yeah.
You want me to do?
Yeah, I think you should.
Okay. I'll try again.
Okay.
See. I'll try to do it a little differently.
Oh man, this is nice.
Okay. Thank you.
English is not his first language.
Yeah.
So we're here tonight to talk about communication, and as all of you can imagine, if I would have continued with that presentation the way that I was giving it, you actually would get the same exact information that I'm going to give going forward, but the message wouldn't have been received in the same way. You wouldn't have listened to much of it, if any of it, except Kip probably would have listened to
I
some.
love hearing your voice, man.
But beyond that, you wouldn't have retained it either. And so, can you hear me now? Except for Kip.
Good.
So I'm Don Warnicki. Really, none of that really matters, and we're in a lightning talk, so we're going to skip that.
Asian division?
Yes. That's my bachelor's degree is from the University of Maryland Asian Division. We can talk about that afterwards because I only have 10 minutes. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about why we deliver messages. We're going to talk about how those messages are received. And we're also going to talk about a few things that you can do to present that message a little bit better and have a better reception. Is anybody here a salesperson? So we have one professional salesperson, and everybody else is a salesperson as well. If you've ever had a job that you actually wanted, went to an interview for a job that you actually wanted, you were trying to get across the message of why you were the right person for that job. You were trying to sell yourself in that aspect. I know none of us get overly passionate about stuff, but if you've ever had a discussion with anybody that you had an opposing view, certainly you were trying to get across either the merits of your view or why the other person was wrong, one of the two. Of course, we are all professionals, so we're interested in the best ideas and only interested in finding the best ideas. But even beyond influencing others to your point of view, just the idea of expanding ideas. If you don't have a compelling message, then the loudest person in the room is the only one that's ever going to be heard. And every decision is going to be based on their ideas. And so from that perspective, you're selling ideas as well as trying to receive ideas from other people. Any of you that know me know that I like to talk about strength-based. I believe in strength-based development and strength-based leadership. Being able to communicate doesn't necessarily mean you can talk. No, but so what we're talking about, is it strength-based? No, it isn't. It really isn't, because I'm not saying if you are talented at communication, you should be listening to what I'm talking about and everybody else should not worry about it. But the reason that I'm saying that is because it can be a debilitating weakness. If you're unable to communicate your ideas, you will not be able to obtain excellence. At least not in the field that I believe all of you are in. Because this field is all about ideas, and it's about learning, and it's about teaching. And so that ability to get ideas across is imperative no matter what your talents are. So how is a message received? There's a couple of important ideas that I want to get across. The first one is that humans make emotional decisions. I recently bought a house, and I can tell you all of the logical reasons, the important reasons, the intelligent reasons that I chose to buy that house. But the truth of the matter is, no matter what logic I put behind it, it was emotional. It was about my kids being in the school district I wanted them to be. It was about the time I spent with my family rather than driving to and from work. And it was about those kind of things. And those are all emotional, even if it's wrapped in logic. It's important to recognize that humans, we do emotions. We make emotional decisions. A guy by the name of Bert Decker talks about an idea. I feel like I'm stuck here. Bert Decker talks about the idea of the first brain. And the first brain is a concept compared to the new brain. So your new brain would be your frontal lobes. It would be where a lot of the logic within thinking is. The first brain is more of the original brain, the brain stem, the amygdala. And it's important to recognize, and what Bert talks about is that messages have to first clear the first brain before they have any hope of getting to the new brain or the higher brain. It is the first filter. And in that first filter, fear takes precedence. Many of you have probably heard about in marketing, fear and sex sells. Those are the two things. And the amygdala and the first brain is first and foremost worried about keeping you alive. And so you have to penetrate that. Now, I am in no means suggesting that every message should be fear-based. But what I am suggesting is that you have to be trusted in order to be heard. Because if somebody doesn't believe that you know what you're talking about, then they're not going to listen to you. And as I mentioned earlier, the message we make emotional decisions, and part of that is because the first brain is emotionally based. Another important fact about people receiving messages is that we as humans are self-interested. If my presentation was about basket weaving, unless some of you may have talents and learner and input where you're interested in learning just anything, most of you wouldn't be very interested. You may pay attention a little bit, but about the time you hit the door, you wouldn't remember anything I said, because it's not self-interest. It's not in your self-interest to learn that. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind about messages and the messages that you're trying to deliver. So how do we do it better? The first thing, which I mentioned briefly, has to do with trust, has to do with being trustworthy. And an important part of that is confidence, is creating this without confidence, like when I initially started reading my paper, it is very difficult to believe that somebody has any idea what they're talking about, because we take that feeling of the person that we don't trust them and we don't trust their knowledge and we don't trust what they're telling us, and we take that to mean that their message is inaccurate. The other thing has to do with eye contact. Eye contact is very important in establishing trust. If I refuse to meet your eyes, it's a sign. We treat it as a sign. It's accepted as a sign, I guess, that that I'm not worthy, that I'm lying to you, that I'm not telling you the truth, and that the message that I have to deliver to you is something that you may not want to listen to. I used to do a little bit of teaching with the Marine Corps, And at that time, I knew that eye contact was important, but the way that I did it was I'd be doing, my keyboard stuff. It was troubleshooting, IT troubleshooting. And then I'd do a quick look at a few people's eyes and then go back to what I was doing. And that's not enough. They say 5 to 7 seconds is about where you need to be to actually have enough eye contact to not come off as being kind of sly or non-trustworthy. Again, there's the emotional connection. Now, I'm not going to talk about trying to create fear in every message that you have, but one of the things that's important with that, the emotional side, is nonverbal cues. And depending on what's lumped into nonverbal, they say between about 80 and the highest number I've seen is 97% of the message is nonverbal. And in the case of the one that was 97%, it actually included inflection in your voice and things like that as a nonverbal. Some of them consider that to be verbal. The other thing is making it a memorable message. Hopefully with the beginning of this presentation and going a little bit over the top with my papers here, hopefully that's helped my presentation to kind of stick out in your mind so that you can remember my message as well as maybe have it affect your life rather than just be something that you saw one night and moved on. So in summary, you're all salespeople. We're all salespeople about selling ourselves and selling our ideas. It's important that you learn, no matter what your talents are, no matter what your job is, that you learn to be heard better and that you're able to deliver that message better. And you can do that by displaying trustworthiness, by being looked upon as being a trustworthy person with eye contact, with eye contact and confidence and other things that I didn't go over, as well as recognizing the emotional influences, whether that is nonverbal cues, whether it's just being memorable, whether it's using stories, whether it's making sure that you can relate to the people that you're trying to send a message to, and making sure that the message hits them in something that they think is important to them. Now, I went through a little fast, so I guess, although my screen only says thank you, I do have about 3 minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question? Chip!
How does body posture play into this whole thing?
So having an erect body posture plays a part in confidence. So if you stand like this, you're less likely to look like you're confident than if you stand like this, since the posture is important in giving presentations.
So, anyone else have any questions? So, you talk about... You're surprised? You talk about...
I'm surprised you can't get it out, that's all.
How do you handle hecklers like Kit?
Just try to teach, try to learn.
I'm learning. I'm actually having good questions. So you talk about the fact where you have to have, 7 to 8 seconds of eye contact?
5 to 7 is
5 to 7. And then, that's good, but at what point does that become creepy? Because, I mean, I don't...
That was my question.
So I haven't read or seen at what point it is considered creepy.
Okay.
You can do an experiment. I can work with you.
It depends very much on what the kind of communication is. I think I left out a story someplace because I didn't say anything about a water cooler. If you're talking to somebody at a water cooler, a longer stare is very appropriate. If I'm standing up here and Kyle, nobody would be surprised, but if I'm staring at one person through the entire presentation, that either gets creepy or it may just look like I'm ignoring everybody else, which would also make me lose credibility with my audience.
Alright, so the last... I have one last... go ahead.
I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Yes, Sam.
So, eye contact is one of the things that bugs me, and I know I don't do it very well. Are there any methods that help improve the length of eye contact that you give?
So, my answer would largely be practice. A lot of people feel uncomfortable actually maintaining eye contact. and so that would be a way to do it. One of the things that Brent talks about, or Bert talks about in one of his books, and his book is called, it's something very close to, you have to be trustworthy to be heard. But he talks about taking basically pictures of people, taking an empty room like this before we came in, taping them to chairs. And so when you practice giving your presentation, which you should do in order to make sure that you know the time, as well as two, you have confidence that you know what's coming next. During that rehearsal, if you make sure that you do eye contact with them, the pieces of paper.
Okay.
Kip!
Last question. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
All right. So, like, what kind of micro expressions should you avoid when you're talking to someone? A lot, probably. Just
So, I have 1 minute to answer this question. I don't know that I have an answer for the question. I haven't read or seen anything that's said about which micro expressions to avoid, or
what about the other way around? Like, which ones should you?
what I can say is it's best to have kind of a level perspective, and people will pick up on micro expressions. And usually micro expressions happen when you have some kind of surprise. You see something unexpected. You hear something that you're not really expecting, so you're not prepared to hide that micro expression. That tends to be the case.
Ask people you know that you work with or go to school with what your tell is. We all have them. And it's fun to actually ask people because they all know, right? You're laughing. You know, right? We all have them. But if you work with people or you know people at school, they'll tell you what they are and try not to do them. It's tough.
It's like an emotional reaction.
Yeah, and you
can't avoid
Can't
it.
fake it.
and you can't not have micro expressions.
Right.
But which gets to a degree of trying to, which ones to avoid. They're subconscious, so it's kind of hard to avoid them.
So it's more of a personal pet peeve of mine, but distractions also, like sitting there and fidgeting with your phone, really puts across disinterest in the conversation. It makes it hard for people to trust you.
Good stuff.
That's that. Now I'm talking about it.
Rewatch that before my next interview.
Yeah. That's it. I'm like a podium hugger. Like I get in here and I'm like, my safety. I stay here. And it's something that's really hard to break when giving talks is like to step away and start moving. As soon as you do this, you're like, I'm in the open. I'm gonna get shot. And I'm like over here and I'm like, whew, there we go. I'm okay over here. Yeah. So definitely it's hard to work on. All right, next up, Chris. Ready?
Yeah, Chris.
I don't know, where'd you put it? Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Sure. Did we resize things right?
I don't know. Let's find out.
Oh my god.
Cool. It's working.
Alright.
Because there's like a nonverbal like quiz type thing.
All right. So this talk came about because I know there's a few people that are just getting into the field and are interested in getting started playing with VMs or doing whatever they can to learn some red team stuff, like penetration testing, web app assessments, vulnerability scanning, that sort of thing. And I also know that there's a handful of people that are either have already started trying to get their OSCP or are planning to get started in the next few months or the next 6 months or so. And I just got done with all that, so I thought we would go over a bit of the recommendations that I received in the past year or so and what I did to prepare for that. So all of this was, it's all fairly recent stuff I collected from about the last 8 months, 7 or 8 months, and most of it came from misec, from Twitter, from IRC channels. So basically just take away from that this is just my impressions and reflections on what I learned for the past year. Your mileage may vary. Some of this might work for you. It might not. But hopefully depending on where you're at and what you're interested in. Some of this might help you out. So the first thing, I apologize, it's kind of hard to read. We had to export this from Keynote to PowerPoint to get it on Kyle's laptop, and all the links are really, really dark. But you can find these. You don't need to look at the links. The key thing to understand when you're getting started with this, if you're starting it right at the beginning, is methodologies. Go and review these methodologies like PTES, the Pen Testing Execution Standard, and OSSTMM, the Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual. The first one should be pretty easy to read in like an afternoon. The second one is a massive PDF that goes over everything. But the important thing is this is going to walk you through the phases of a pen test and give you a really good foundation for understanding how those sorts of assessments go forward from beginning to end. Because you're going to learn about a lot of different tools and a lot of different things that you're going to have to try to sort mentally and figure out where they belong. Just kind of like having a carpenter's toolbox. There's lots of tools in there that almost never come out of the box, but sometimes they come out for very unique things, very specialty projects. So you're going to have to try to mentally sort all that to know when to deploy something, and understanding the methodologies is key to that. And then OWASP, of course, go familiarize yourself with the OWASP Top 10 and their web app testing methodologies, because that'll be really important going forward as well. Then you're going to have to do a lot more reading even after that. One of the books that I like that I would recommend starting off with is actually the Metasploit, the Penetration Tester's Guide by Dave Kennedy and the others listed there. The reason I like this book isn't because it'll teach you Metasploit. What? I can't read that. I can't read that. You can go look it up. It's all blurry even on your laptop screen. So, damn you. So, threw me off. All right, so the reason I like this book isn't because it'll teach you about Metasploit. It will, obviously, but what's really nice is that they start off the first, probably eighth of the book is walking you through the methodology and the phases of a pen test. And throughout the book, they actually introduce other technologies to you, other tools. They introduce the concept of shellcode, generating your own shellcode, when you might want to use a NOP slide, exploit development, all because these are things that Metasploit can do. So they actually touch on a lot of things that'll help you build up a vocabulary so that when you're going forward and learning new things, you'll start encountering concepts that you've already been introduced to through this book and won't be entirely foreign to you. Like when you get started reading the Hacker's Playbook. And I recommend if you do pick this up, pick up the second edition. The first edition is still totally fine if you can find a copy of that and not the other one for some reason, or a friend will let you borrow the first edition. Just know there's a lot of GitHub links and things in that it references that are outdated. You might have to actually hunt around on GitHub to find where the repos have moved. But this book is really great because it gets more technical. It's a bit harder to just sit down and read, but it walks through, again, all the phases of a pen test, but then goes through various tool recommendations, how to use those tools, when they might be helpful, what they do, some of the different options. It's by no means complete. You can't just go through this and follow the steps and actually do a pen test, but it would get you a good part of the way there towards understanding how to do all that, which is why the third bullet point here is actually reading the help pages for a tool. Read the documentation, read the help pages, dig into it, go check out the GitHub repo and check out the comments and the commits. Nothing is going to help you understand the tools better than that, because if you ask 10 different people what's the best way to run Nmap, you're going to get 10 different answers. Because everyone's going to have their own personal, favorite, default line they go to, and then there's going to be 100 different caveats. Well, if you're in this scenario, you're going to want to run this way, you're going to want to run it that way. Nothing is entirely complete. You're going to have to play it by ear when you're actually using these tools. Then some other helpful books would be things like Violent Python or the Nmap Cookbook. These are just things that'll help you further understand those tools. And Python is just really helpful in general because you're going to find a lot of exploit code that's written in Python and C, and being able to parse through that when you're looking at it on exploit DB or just a script or a tool, and you're trying to understand what it's doing or why it's not working. At least having an understanding of Python is going to be incredibly helpful. And with that, GitHub, again, you really want to get on GitHub. If you don't have an account, make one. You don't have to actually have code. You don't need to be making commits with that GitHub account. You can go through, you can follow people, you can star repos, tools that you like. If there's a tool you like and you might be worried that it'll go away or the repo might change, you can fork it to keep that tool so you always have a copy of it. One of the things I like is I almost use GitHub. I actually have repos and everything, but I actually use it. Most of my day-to-day on GitHub is using it almost like Twitter. I follow several people that I know are constantly updating tools that I like. Like Got Milk is a really good example. He's constantly starring things and forking really interesting repos, and usually just following through his activity feed, I can find some really cool stuff. So just getting on there and poking around is going to be really helpful to you, and also get you better acquainted with the code. Like I said, a lot of those tools you're going to find on GitHub, most of them are open source and most of them are Python. So you can get in there and start looking around, see how they actually work, and maybe even make some changes of your own if you want to personalize them a little bit, like them to run a little bit differently. Then one example of why GitHub's pretty awesome is you can find things like this on there too. Basically, this says everything else I would want to talk about with online resources available to you. If you go to, again, really hard to see, but basically just look for pen test bookmarks on GitHub. And this guy has created a repo of basically every security blog I've ever heard of, different documentation for tools, where you can find test, like broken VMs to test with. It's a huge, huge list, all just in one big markdown file called bookmark list. You can go through there and find a bunch of really cool stuff, way more than I have time to talk about or show you in a slide. So definitely check that out, because there's tons of stuff available. And then, of course, there's ExploitDB. If you've never been on there, you're going to want to make your way there when you're starting out, because this is it's a huge repo of basically all the public exploit code you're going to be able to find on the internet. It's run by Offensive Security. It's often pretty slow, but you can find a lot of really cool stuff on there. And even if you're not looking for something specific, you can get on there and just search around. They have a feed of all the new stuff that gets checked in. If you really feel up to it, down the road or something, you can actually even volunteer to be one of the people that works with OffSec to go through and validate some of the exploit code and be involved in that project. Because that's what the whole thing just runs on volunteers, and actually what makes it really cool and kind of unique is that they vet the proof of concept code, make sure it's not dangerous for you to run it, and also make sure that it actually works, actually does what it says, and the vulnerability actually exists. So for the most part, the stuff you find on there is pretty good. So at this point, you're going to want to set up your own virtual lab. And to get started with that, VirtualBox is really easy to get started with. It's free. You can just download it. And Kali even has a VirtualBox machine you can download that's ready to go. You just import it and off you go you have Kali 2 all set up for you. Although down the road, I would encourage spending some money on VMware Fusion Pro or the equivalent for Windows or Linux, whichever one you use, just because it offers a lot of additional features like snapshots and some more advanced networking features that'll be really handy if you get into some more advanced testing scenarios that you want to start playing with some stuff. Snapshots are really huge. One, because you can back up your VMs, but two, you can set up, say, a Windows XP box and then have snapshots for Service Pack 0, Service Pack 1, 2, 3, and be able to switch between patch levels really easily while you're playing around with different exploits or just screwing around. Once you have your Kali box set up, you're going to want to get some test VMs. And there's tons of really awesome ones available. So the one you probably want to start off with is Metasploitable 2. It's available from Rapid7 and actually even comes with a pretty neat guide that'll walk you through like a dozen different ways for you to exploit the machine. Basically just has a ton of open ports running all kinds of services that are all totally broken. And you can exploit most of them. I think most of them are just even remote code execution. You just drop right in as root and you're good to go. So what I would recommend is follow through Rapid7's guide, learn, get acquainted with Metasploit and some of how to actually run some of the modules, and then try repeating the process, doing it manually. Go to ExploitDB, hunt down the actual exploit code, run it, see if it works. And then once you're ready to move away from that, you can actually start looking at web apps. So there's lots of different broken web apps you can download, like Damn Vulnerable Web App, DVWA, and Utilidae. Or you can actually just go find OWASP BWAP, the Broken Web Application Project, which includes Utilidae, includes Damn Vulnerable Web App, and a ton of other stuff. And it's just a VM you can download from VulnHub or other sources and you just run it. It comes up with a nice help screen at the login prompt that says, here's my current IP, go to this to get started. And a lot of these, the web apps that they include, there's tons of guides out there. to bring up Got Milk again, he's doing a whole series on how to test and break different parts of DAM vulnerable web app. You can follow along with him while he's writing those right now. And there's also just tons of guides available for the other stuff that comes with the OWASP machine. And sources for these are abundant. One of the really good ones is Pentester Lab. These are set up more as courses. So they actually have a list that says, like, here's our easiest VM all the way down to what they consider their hardest. But they all come with what they refer to as a course, which is basically just a walkthrough on how to break the machine, how to get in. So you can follow it along, basically like you're in a class, you have the VM and just follow along with the steps, or try to break it yourself and refer to the course in case you get stuck, whatever you want to do. They have some really good stuff. VulnHub is another really good one. This is a repo where a lot of people dump their use CTF machines, things like that. And there's also whole groups of people out there that just make broken VMs for fun. A lot of them are kind of like riddles, so you might have to solve a riddle to figure out what port you need to look at next, or different things like that. But a lot of these can be really fun and help you get in a little bit more practice. And there's also online labs. So there's some really cool ones. Again, I apologize for the videos being really dark. Over the Wire is a good one. They have lots of downloadable VMs, again, from like CTFs and other ones that they make, as well as an online lab where mostly you're just using burp and some knowledge of web app vulnerabilities to get passwords from the website and slowly enter those passwords to go on to the next level. But another really cool one is lab.infoseclabs.net. And this is actually, I believe, technically part of Pentester Labs. But the really cool thing about this is, if you can see on the right side, they give you a bunch of pages that all have examples like, hey, this page is vulnerable to command execution. Figure it out. And you can do it all online, so you don't need even a Kali VM. You can just point your browser at it and you're good to go. But what's really cool is, for example, this is their command example 1. And I've actually just catted out the etc password file of this server. It's actually an exploitable server. This isn't simulated. You can actually break into the server and get into a whole hidden lab. They have all their Windows and Linux boxes connected to the server that if you can get a reverse shell on it, you can actually start trying to pivot and move laterally deeper into their lab network they have set up with this website. So it can go much deeper than just screwing around on the website and practicing cross-site scripting. You can get a lot deeper. But it does require you to either set up some port forwarding to be able to catch that reverse shell on your home network, or go as far as like setting up an Amazon EC2 instance with Kali and using that for your testing. But the guy that, and just so you know that I'm not trying to convince you to go break into some guy's web server, the guy that runs this actually has a walkthrough that shows you how you can get started, setting up Amazon EC2 and getting a reverse shell back on this website. So eventually you might get to the point where you feel you want to get some more formalized training. You've been playing with your virtual lab enough, and you'd like to move forward. Like I mentioned at the beginning, that I know there's a few people that are getting started here. I wanted to, just for comparison, throw up 2 of the different certs. To talk about offensive securities pen testing with Kali course and their OSCP cert first. For 2 months of lab access, it's $1,000. I recommend going with 60 days of lab access first, and so does OffSec. They do offer a 30 and a 90-day option, but 60 is probably your best bet. Just because if you look at it this way, getting 90 days right off the bat is $1,200, and adding 30 days at the end of your 60 days is $250. So really, you're just gambling $50. But if you get it done in 60 days, you just save $250. You just save $200 at least. So I recommend getting started with 60 days. And the really cool thing that I like about OSCP is that, this is the end. I'm wrapping up. What I really like about this is that all the materials they give you, there's 8 hours of video that are narrated by Mutz, and as well as a really nice, like 370-page PDF textbook that you get to keep. It's all, you just download it. It's all downloaded video. They give it to you in one big zip file, and you're good to go. It's just yours to keep forever. And then obviously, you do eventually lose access to the lab, and that it all ends with the kind of infamous 24-hour practical exam where you're given a certain number of lab machines that you have to break into and then write up a big report explaining how you captured the like 8 or so different flags on the network. Compare that to the other one that's, and this is all really what I heard. This is really where opinion comes into effect. 'Cause I don't know much about EC Council's certifications, except from what I've heard from other people who basically say it's not recommended. So you might have heard about the Certified Ethical Hacker cert. It's my understanding that it's really fallen out of favor. There was a point where it was considered a pretty good cert to go get, but now it's not considered that. And honestly, I can kind of see why. If you go look at their website, read their FAQ, it gets a little bit silly. And their website opens up so many new tabs. Just every time you click on a link trying to learn more, it opens up a new tab. It just has new windows for everything. But in comparison to like the OSCP, it's $18.99 for their self-teaching option. And that gets you 6 months of lab access and 1 year access to their teaching software. So it kind of time versus money, it might work out to be sort of a better deal, especially if you don't think you have enough time. 60 days might be too short. But the thing here that I found kind of shocking is that compared to OSCP, it's six months of lab access, but then their textbook is software. You lose that after a year. So no keeping that for reference later. And then all their videos are streaming videos that you also lose access to either after. It was a little bit unclear if that was part of the lab or part of the software. So at the end of this, you have nothing other than the cert, most likely. You don't get to keep any of the materials. And then at the end, it's a 125-point multiple choice exam. It's not a practical exam. So it's very different than the OSCP. And like I said, from what I've heard, it's less. It's not considered anywhere near as good. I know Leslie Carhart's recent series on getting started in InfoSec. She's also recommends steering clear of EC Council. But I do recommend taking the OSCP class if you get to that point where you want to learn more. I thought it was a pretty terrific course to go through. And that's it.
Questions? Any questions? Lots of comments. Reddit.
Black Hat Python. I know you had the other book there.
Yeah, Black Hat Python. I haven't read it, but I've heard it's really good. I've flipped through it. I want to read it and check it out.
Yeah, it's one of the resources I use to learn Python.
Yeah, so check that one out too. That's another really good one. Any other questions?
Not really a question. Another kind of fun, not really VM place, but the CTF to do would be coming up soon the SANS holiday challenges.
Mm-hmm.
That's worth taking a look at just if you're.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. Cool.
Yeah, and SCOTUS puts it on usually. I'm sure there'll be one this year.
Okay, cool.
But it's not really a full downloadable VM. What?
It's on ICS this year.
And it's on ICS.
Okay.
Did you have a lot of development skills before you started this, or did you pick most of them up on the way?
I picked up most of them on the way, but I also committed myself to developing a phishing tool. So, like I said, years ago I took classes in C as part of a computer science program at Western, but by no means do I know C, but I know enough to fumble my way through troubleshooting some exploit code. So it's not, it's important, but you don't need to be a developer. Anything else?
Start with automating
That'll conclude our lightning talks. What do you guys think of them?
Cool.
Not bad? Not bad? Yeah, I thought that was actually the most technical talk that we had tonight, which is fantastic. So please, any suggestions? If you guys have any other talks, I'd like to do maybe 1 or 2 of these a year. So if you do have a topic you'd like to talk on, let me know. Also interested in putting together a workshop for working on your talks, how you practice them, things like that, your mannerisms, arms out, stuff like that. If anyone's interested in that, also let me know. I'll try and arrange to get that together. That I don't have anything else. Anybody else have any other announcements? Things? What do you?
In addition to Kyle's volunteer announcement, the Convergent B-side dates are posted on the website.
Oh yeah.
So
Go earlier. We're changing them up.
Huh?
Yeah.
Changed them up.
It's still in July.
Okay.
The venue didn't have earlier, unfortunately.
And you're sticking with Wayne State?
Wayne State.
Yep.
Cool.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for coming, guys.
They told us now they're not gonna run it out.
Anybody going anywhere after?
I think people are. Goodbye.